Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kim Barrett Show. I am your host, Kim Barrett, and on today's episode, we go through customer acquisition. Are you a baller or are you a beginner? On this episode, you're definitely going to want to watch this on YouTube, on Facebook, get all the ins and outs, all the intricacies to help you become better at your customer acquisition. Now, if you're someone that's running small, low barrier entry products, if you're someone that is doing sales calls, whatever it is for you, this is definitely going to help you out from my perspective. I believe this will definitely give you some good ammunition to go forward with your customer acquisition process. And of course, if we can help you with that, just head over to our Facebook community, www.joinmygroup.com.au, where we have everything you need for your customer acquisition and more. But until then, let's jump into the show. Hey guys, Kim Barrett here. So today I want to talk to you about customer acquisition and breaking down the difference between someone who's out there being a baller and someone who's a beginner. So if we look at both these types of guys, right? The beginner here, you can see they've got the slightly smaller ball, and the actual baller, they've got the big ball, right? And I want to break down and look at what's going to happen on the front end acquiring customers versus the back end, and the difference it makes when you know these numbers, and if you actually go around this and treat it as if you are, a baller, as if you are a pro, rather than just someone who's hoping that their ads might work. So let's just say that on the front end, what we're going to look at here, right? So we're going to look at, and if we've got let's just say that where we've got someone on the front end who's willing to spend, as not as little, but they're like, oh, this is our beginner over here, right? If they're going to be willing to spend, let's just say they've got a product that they're selling, right? A self-liquidating offer or something like that. They might say, hey, I'm willing to spend $100, right? $100 to get me a buyer, right? $100, and they go, okay, cool. I'm willing to get $100 for someone to come over here and buy my FEP, my front end product, right? So if we go, okay, they're willing to spend $100, and let's just say that they're able to get 5 of those $100 buyers, right? Which means, the 5 people at $100, which means that they've spent 500 smackers, right? They've spent $500 to get those. And let's just say that for ease of math purposes, that is a $200 front end, right, product. Then that means that they've made 1,000, right? So they think over here, they're like, I'm balling, right? Because they've got their profit. They're like, great, $500. I've made $500 on my front end. I'm killing it, right? Now, this is what a lot of people do. And then they're just like, oh, I'm absolutely killing it. I put in $1, I make $2 back. Absolutely killing it on the front end. And then they go, I just want to keep doing that. But as soon as this amount over here starts to increase, they start to freak out, right? And this is where you really need to have this should be a smiley face. This is where you need to have a baller mentality when it comes to how you're running your ads. So as opposed to being willing to spend 100, these guys over here are willing to spend $200 for that same FEP, for that same front end product, right? So these guys are willing to spend 200, but as opposed to only getting 5, because these guys have more spend, they're willing to crank up their ads more. They get 10 buyers, and it costs them $200, right? So quick math. That means that these guys spent $2,000, right? $2,000. And what did they make? If it's a $200 like same product, right? Just 2 different advertisers, means that they made $2,000, right? So their front end profit is 0. So a lot of people would be like, oh, like, dude, this sucks. Facebook ads don't make me any money, right? But only the people that are willing to be ballers and the people that are willing to spend what they know they need to spend are actually going to be able to scale, because these guys know, right, the mathematical secret, which is about the back end, right? Which is about your back end products and services and the lifetime value of customers. And this is where the game is won when it comes to advertising. It's won in dollars and cents, right? Who knows their numbers best to be able to spend the most, right? So they've made $0 on the front end here, right? They've made $0 in profit. However, once we start scaling out, and that's only our front end product, which is 2,000. So let's just say that both of us, again, same business model, right? Just two different advertisers, a beginner versus a baller. And let's just say that we've got a $1,000 back end product, right, for both of them. Now, what's going to happen is we look at this, cool, we've got that profit. Then we go, cool, we've got 5 people. And let's just say that for all intensive purposes, right, not necessarily would every single time everyone upgrade, but we know that our average value is $1,000 of $1,000 is our lifetime value. Let's just say that it's like for purposes, it's over a year, right? There could be more, but over a year, we know that one customer spends $1,000 with us on average, right? And so it could be higher, it could be lower, but we know our back end. So these guys then have got, right, 5 at 1,000, they made $5,000, right, on their back end. So their back end to them is worth 5K. So if we look at it, right, we've add that, there's no extra ad spend cost, which means that these guys are now profiting, right? They're sitting pretty, they got 5,500 in profit. Right, they're sitting over here like, we bowling, right? However, this is where the mass and scale really comes into play, because now if we look at these guys down here who are balling out, right, what happens to them is they start to increase, right? And they have the same lifetime value of $1,000. What happens to them is they have 10, right? So they have $10,000 sitting pretty in their lifetime value, right? So they know that in that year, they're going to bring in 10K. So that means for them, they've brought in 10,000 on their back end. Yes, they made any front end profit, but overall their position sitting pretty at 10,000, right? Versus 5,500 over here, right? So when you break that down, that is a 181% increase, right? 181% increase in the business because, right, and it sounds weird, because they're willing to spend more on the front end, right? They're willing to be ballers and spend more on the front end, which means on the back end, right, they actually end up with 181% more than those who are just worrying about that little front end profit. So as you can see, by being able to spend more, right, on your customer acquisition, if you know your numbers and know what it's willing to do, you shouldn't be trying to figure out, right? The wrong question is, how do I bring this number down? That's the wrong question to ask anyone. The question that you need to ask is, how can I spend more here? Right? How can I spend more so I can use more traffic sources? I can use bigger scale. I can spend more budget, because here we actually have, right, because we've made 10,000. Like, to drop down, we can spend an extra. If we look at the difference between the two, we can spend an extra $4,500 on the front end, right? We can still spend $4,500 more than these guys, and still be at the same margin. So, and if we know that that means how many more front end buyers could we buy than them? You go 4,500 divided by what are we willing to spend? 200, right? We could get an extra 22 buyers, or an extra $22,000, right? Or we could spend, if it's $4,500 more, we could spend $650. Right? We could increase that. We could spend $450 more than them to get a buyer. It's like, do you reckon you could get more buyers if you were willing to spend and pay $650 for someone to give you 200? The answer should be dramatically yes. Right? So that is how you do the math. That is how you figure out and how you can actually work out how you can be a baller versus a beginner when it comes to your ad and your ad spend. And if you think about it and do that math right, it means that the only question you should ever be asking is, how can I spend more, right? Rather than how can I decrease this? Like, how can I decrease what I require them for? Because we know this little bit of measly profit here is not anything. It's all the money is made in our back-end products. So if we know the big number we need to know is our lifetime value, or at least 12-month value of a customer, then you can win the game because you know what those numbers are. So yes, of course, everyone's like, oh, I love to, make money on the front end down here, right? But really we know the game is won back here because the more people that we can put in the front end, right? The more we're willing to spend, right? The more that we can actually go out there and acquire, because if we can spend $200, we can keep our ads running longer, we can keep them running more aggressive, which means we get more buyers than those people on the front end as well, because we're willing to spend more, because we know our money is made in the back end. And I say, take that into consideration. Two businesses, same product, same price points, different advertisers, right? We've got the beginner versus the bowler. We could get 22 more buyers, $22,000 more, or we can spend $650 more, $650 rather than 100, right? So that's the difference between being a baller and a beginner when it comes to your customer acquisition.